News from the front lines. That is what most of us depend on when we're looking for information during a war. And this is usually delivered by war correspondents backed by very large traditional media outlets. But this time, this experience has been very different.
But the thing, they start sending over rockets. They literally land anywhere.
For many of us Armenians, since September 27th, we've been glued to our phones looking for information about what is happening in Artsakh, in Nagorno-Karabakh, between Azerbaijan and the fighters on the ground. But we've been fortunate to have an independent documentary maker, an independent correspondent who was embedded in the front line since October 12th.
So we've all just run into this bunker, and where we're going to sit low, and then once it's clear, we're going to go back to the city.
If you don't know what I'm talking about, let me introduce you to Emile Ghessen.
You hear the artillery going over, and these guys are really just holding the defence here.
He is a former Royal Marine Commando. He has served in Afghanistan and in Iraq. He's a documentary maker. He's made documentaries about volunteer fighters in Syria and in Iraq, and he's been embedded in the Ukraine as well. He decided to go to Artsakh.
And you can hear the drone flying over.
And a lot of Armenians in the diaspora, a lot of Armenians within Armenia have been relying on his information, on his posts and his stories to see firsthand what is happening on the ground. I am so pleased to be joined by this very courageous man. I want to take a moment on behalf of the Armenian diaspora. Thank you for the courage, for your service, for your ability to really tell the human side of this war. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Tell us, where are you now? Because you're not in Armenia or Artsakh anymore.
No, I left early hours of this morning. I'm now currently in Ukraine, and there's a project I'm working on here for a few days before I return back to the UK.
We have all watched your stories. We've all watched you post information about what's happening in the front lines and about what's happening to the people who have stayed behind. But one of the things that I was curious about as a journalist is what made you decide to actually even go?
Well, I left the military after 12 years service, and then went into the private security industry where I was a bodyguard and I was doing anti-piracy work. And my father is a Syrian Christian from Damascus who's been in the UK for over 30 years. And with the war of Islamic State in the Middle East, and I met a guy in a pub that was going out to fight ISIS as a volunteer, Kurd. Well, he's British, but he was joining the Kurds. And I thought, what is actually going on there? I go, well, he's going off to fight a war. I have family in Syria. I don't feel the need to go fight there. But I thought, rather than actually using a weapon, for my time in Iraq and Afghanistan, using a weapon didn't really change much, long term, I don't believe. And I thought, I'm going to buy a camera and I'm going to go out to Syria, I'm going to follow this guy and find out what's actually going on, so I get a better understanding on the conflict, and then I can educate other people. And I think that's how my journey started into the filmmaking and journalism work. I just bought a camera, and for 3 years I made my first documentary back and forth in Iraq, Syria, and I also went over into Iran dressed as one of the rebels up in the mountain hideouts, and Ukraine.
You have been doing this for a while. I have been doing this for 20 some odd years, right? I've been a journalist for 20 years. And I know just from covering news locally that social media has significantly changed the way we cover news, and it's changed the way we consume information. Can you tell me how the access to technology and access to social media, particularly now with Twitter and Instagram and stories, how that has impacted or not impacted or changed the way we share information, and you were able to get this information on the grassroots, ground level, firsthand accounts out? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So years ago, people used to rely on reading newspapers for information, and also listen to the wireless, and then the television, where you would have a certain time of day where the news would be on. Then that evolved into 24-hour news. Now we live in an era of what many people call new media, which is the social media platform. Mm-hmm. And as a world, we've become a lot closer, as it's become smaller because the advance advancement of technology, of information, the passive information, of rather than selected times of day, that certain gatekeepers of information, such as journalists, will control what they want you to know or what they don't want you to know. We now have the internet where everyone could be potentially a citizen journalist. And a lot of the big media outlets I know from my own work is they monitor social media. So if there was an incident, for example, if there's a terrorist attack in London, I wouldn't be turning on BBC to find out what's going on, or Channel 4. I'll be going on Twitter. I'll be going on Facebook. I'll be going on to social media platforms, because that's first-hand accounts of what's physically going on. And people want to see that. But the problem we have with this is disinformation and misinformation. And the difference between misinformation and disinformation is disinformation, for those who don't know it, is someone who's intentionally telling lies. Misinformation is where someone sees that lie, thinks it's real, and then shares it. And they, like, we've all got a grandma or an auntie on the WhatsApp group that starts sharing a post that we all know is ridiculous. She's not doing it maliciously, it's just the misinformation. So even though I'm a journalist or filmmaker, I like using social media.
And this was the position that came under attack yesterday by 2 rockets from Azerbaijan. Militarily, there's nothing here other than the fact is troops use it as a transit route.
So on this trip, when I went out there, I always do behind the scenes. People like to know what's going on through Instagram stories. So I just do little Instagram stories. And from the conflict here in Armenia, it seemed to hit off, and the community, Armenian communities just jumped on it because there's a lack of information that's going on the ground. And that's a combination of things. One, it's a combination of a lack of journalists on the ground, because there's no real appetite for this conflict. So I think a lot of people see it as a regional conflict that's not really moved into, it's not a proxy war, there's no real interest. And not only that, is the world's busy. They're busy with COVID. Everyone's got their own policy at home with COVID, and America is very busy with the US election. So the world is busy at the moment. And not only that, there's a lot of countries, a lot of protests going on, civil unrest in some places. So I think this conflict, which has been driven by Turkey, in my opinion, and Azerbaijan, have used the timing here perfectly.
You talked about several things that I want to touch on. Is this lack of information coming out of the region, this lack of interest, this lack of journalists on the ground? That was going to be my question. Did you see a lot of journalists on the ground? Because I have been, being a responsible journalist and sharing of information, I like verifying information before I spread it, because that's a responsibility that I feel like I carry, that I think everybody should carry when it comes to social media stuff. But I haven't seen a lot of firsthand accounts coming out of the region, other than what I've seen you post, and maybe a couple of other outlets that did one story and then it just fizzled out.
The way the media works now is, and I think Armenia doesn't really understand this in the media sense, that a lot of the main news outlets, well, money's tight for all companies now. So rather than sending crews out, they buy footage of freelancers. So when they go, who do you work for? And I go, I'm a freelancer. And they're like, and it's like, well, potentially I could work for anyone. I could be working for one company one day, the next day I'm working for another company as a freelancer. And I don't think they really appreciate that they trying to get my accreditation to start with. I felt a bit like, because you're a freelancer, you're a nobody here, you're just turning up as such, which especially Russian journalists, they love Russian journalists out there. There seem to be more Russian journalists in the region rather than anyone else. So you had trouble getting credentials and maintaining your credentials? No, I didn't have trouble. It just seemed it took a bit of time. Got massive amounts of time compared to some other people. It's quite quick, but I'm very impatient and I wanted to get on the ground, see what's going on, rather than sit there. I hate sitting idly when you ask a question. Why did it take you so long? Oh, it's just procedure.
So this lady, she's got 8 children.
What I found really striking about your coverage is that, like I said, I spent 20 some odd years as a journalist, but also I go back to my childhood. I'm a child of war. I lived through the Iran-Iraq war when I was growing up. So anytime I cover conflict or I think about war, I always go back to that 8-year-old, 9-year-old self and know and feel the human side of war. And I thought you capture that so well in your stories, in your images, in the way you presented what was happening. And this constant conversation and argument about how this is our land, how you are occupying this land, and it is internationally recognized. It's somehow this human element and the impact of what's happening on the ground on the people gets lost were it not for people like you. Can you talk to me a little bit about what you saw when it comes to the human element of this war, and also how this war is being fought very differently with the drones and the psychological warfare that happens that impacts not only the people that are there, but also the children that are in the middle of it?
So I was spending most of the time in Stepanakert, and then from there going out to different regions and staying back in the city. And it's eerie. It's like a ghost town in the sense that the only people that remain are the old, the sick, and the vulnerable. And my time there, going into the shelters, meeting people, I only saw one family with young children. The majority of them have left. They're across the border in places like Goris or up in the main cities. But yeah, it's very eerie. And like you're saying there about the drone, out of all the conflicts I've been to, and this is a very different one in the sense that it's conventional force on force, but at the same time it's a new tactic of the drone.
Exploded. Pardon? You heard the explosion? It's exploded, so it's just gone off somewhere, so it's hit a target. They're the kamikaze ones that are...
And the drone, what is brought to this conflict is a psychological war, in the sense the sound of the drone flying over is that civilians are living underground because they're scared of the drone. When I was on the front line of the soldiers, we heard a drone flying over, so we straight away got under cover so they couldn't see us. It's changed warfare. It's just that sound. So at the beginning of the conflicts, when Azerbaijan started bombing very heavily, I think they thought they would break the spirit very quickly and roll on, but that didn't happen. So they've deployed the drones very successfully, and all you've got to do is look online at the amount of drone. They film it all, and they're posting on social media, and all their drone strikes they're doing on Armenian vehicles and tanks and positions and stuff. So it's a very scary war in the sense that when I served in Afghanistan, the biggest fear we had in later tours was the IED, that every step you could take could be your last one. And I think now this conflict switched that on their head, that there's a drone in the sky, you can hear some of them, but the other ones are so high that you can't hear, that we've got kamikaze drones, which is where the drone is actually a warhead. So it's flying around. Once it locates its target, it then nosedives like a Japanese pilot during the Second World War straight into its target. I'd say the drones are targeting the military, but they're using the Smerch rocket launcher, which is targeting civilian targets, where it launches up from the back of a truck, and the shell, you probably see it on my Instagram actually, where the shells are just all over the city. And when it does, that breaks off, and then a cluster of bombs drop down, and then they explode in different areas. And when the target is in civilian towns, and like one night in the hotel, I was on the 4th floor.
The siren's going.
Of the hotel, and there's loads of civilians in the basement. And you can hear the rounds, but the bombs going off in and around the hotel area, and the echo of the town, and the siren going off. I'm used to war, but at the end of the day, when you never know where it's going to land, you think it doesn't matter how professional you are, what experience you've got, if it's going to land on you, it's going to land on you.
The cousin of the man who was killed says 2 bombs landed, one to the side and one through the roof, and that he was a 50-year-old civilian.
Going around in the morning, looking at all the positions, all the locations destroyed, and it was heartbreaking for me. In the morning, I went to one house where there's a few journalists who turn up, and a husband and wife were just crying because they were looking at their house that had just been destroyed overnight. Seeing a mother and a father crying because their house, everything they owned, was been destroyed, and the grandma was in the house but luckily survived the strike. Yeah, they're not solely going for military targets, and it's the civilians once again that are suffering.
Tell me your impression of being in that region. How is this different from everywhere else you've been? How is it the same? Tell me a little bit about that experience for you.
Well, my brother's partner, wife, is Armenian, and So I've met a few Armenians over the time, but I never realised how actually passionate Armenians are about Armenia until I actually physically got there, and that's something I've learned. Then this is why I go to places like this, so I can understand the grassroots, and I'm not a mouthpiece for Armenia at all. I'm not here to spread propaganda or misinformation, disinformation on your behalf for your cause at all. I'm totally independent. I say what I see, but when I've got so many people speaking to me, and the thing with Armenians, you always revert back to the 1915 genocide and how there's several people, several nations that deny it ever happened, which clearly is, I can't believe that people would actually deny it. But when you're in this conflict now and you're getting people going, we're not fighting for territory, we're fighting for survival, because if we don't stand and fight here, potentially we could have another genocide. And the world turned a blind eye before, and at the moment no one's reporting it. Are they turning another blind eye? As a nation of people, you're very passionate. You've got a lot of deep history, and you feel like the world's forgotten about you. And speaking to people, and they go, "Oh yeah, where's the world? Where's the international community? Why is no one stopping this?" And it's true. Why is no one stopping it? And like I said earlier in the interview, it's because the world's busy elsewhere. That no one, in my opinion, thinks it's that much of a priority at the moment. Geopolitically, you've also got Turkey involved, you've got Russia involved. Do other countries actually want to get involved in this? Because it's a conflict of interest between NATO and Russia.
Yeah. Did you ever feel, I hate to use the word scared, because it takes a certain kind of person to be in these types of situations, and you've been there before, you've been in war before, so you know what to anticipate or expect. Was there a moment where you felt, I probably should not be here? Was there a moment where you felt like?
No, I don't get scared as such. I mean, of course, at times I have been scared, but not in this conflict as such. It's more the nervousness of not knowing what's going on, especially when things are dropping out of the sky, and then you have to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and you're dead, or seriously wounded. So yeah, it's that unease of, because I don't understand this battlefield. It's new to me at the moment, but you soon settle into it and what's going on. And yeah, I wouldn't say no, I wasn't scared at any time, but you can see the fear in a lot of the civilians when they're living underground in their bunkers, especially the old and the vulnerable who were around in the last war, so they know what happened. And they see it again. And not only that, they see their sons, especially the old people, they saw their sons go off to war. Now they're seeing their grandkids going off to war. And I don't know, it's heartbreaking to see them when you've got a woman who's saying, 2 of her grandsons have been killed. And I went to a funeral. The interpreter who was me, he asked the father, would you mind if this British journalist filmed you? He's like, no, show the world. And so I just sat off to the side and filmed it, and my brothers died, and seeing my father bury his son was very emotional, and it's something, seeing this, and that was at the funeral of the soldier who had been killed, and his father crying, kissing it, the open casket, kissing his son, and then the rest of the family members coming through, kissing him before they close the casket and put him in the ground. And it's like, that's the reality of war. It's not about politics when you're dealing with someone, a father losing his son. There's more to it. It's a human side of war. And people think they're just blasé about it. It's like, well, they're in our country, they shouldn't be. I think people wherever you go. The majority of people in the world, whatever nation you are, whatever religion you are good people, no matter what you think. The bad thing is the politics and the leaders and the governments. And I think in this conflict here, I think there's a bit of a hatred through history of what's going on in this region. But going back to the human side of it, when you see a farmer burying his son, you think, for what? But then the family think, is that if people aren't fighting, potentially we're all going to be killed. And I think very much that's how a lot of Armenians feel, and you can feel that. I get that sense, especially that you've got more Armenians living out of Armenia than actually in Armenia. That a lot of people are nervous of what's going on, and they're not getting that information, like you said. And it seems to be through my Instagram that so many people, the messages are real, and people saying, "Oh, I wake up in the morning, the first thing I want to do is see your story, see what's going on." Or people saying to me, "Oh, my grandparents are watching you because I show them because they want to know what's going on." That lack of information has made a lot of people uneasy on what's going on in this conflict.
One of the other things that I heard you say on one of your Instagram stories is that what makes this particular conflict and this war different is that all of the other places you've been, you've physically gone from one location to another location to fight for something, right? This is different because this is the people fighting for not just their land, but for their survival, for their identity, for their... So talk to me a little bit about, did you understand that before you got there? Or tell me about the process of kind of coming to that realization while you were there.
Yeah, so my military career, I served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and these are wars that were in faraway lands that I was fighting. And the war that's going on between Armenia and Azerbaijan is very much, it's on people's land. So they're fighting on their home front. And I was getting the sense from speaking to the soldiers, I was getting the sense from speaking to civilians that they're fighting for the soil that their ancestors bled over. And that's why it makes it very personal. The Ministry of the media press office are quite reluctant to allow journalists to the front line to speak to soldiers. They're very they don't want. They're worried about information getting out that the enemy can use on taking photos of vehicles. So they're very selective on when you can or can't film. Like when I went to the front line, I was given permission to film, and I'm very experienced in combat, and this is not me being big-headed, but I've probably got more experience in combat than the majority of Armenian soldiers on the front line currently now. And knowing that I understand the media side of things, I understand of how to influence through that message. And I think that, I don't know, more needs to be done. And by them saying don't film the soldiers, for example, but then go to the front line and go, you can film the soldiers. So is every soldier I spoke to, I'm like, do you mind if I take your picture? Do you mind if I film? They're like, show my face. I'm not scared of them. I'm not scared of them. Show the world, do you mean, what we're our story. Tell them how high morale is and that we're doing well in this war. And I think the community, Armenian community around the world and in the country, don't see that because they're not allowed to see it. Until they see it, they might see it from an Armenian journalist, but then people look at it and go, well, that's probably staged. But when a guy like me turns up, and I'm showing it on Instagram, the guy's having a laugh on the front line, like one of the soldiers they were calling him Chuck Norris, and they're saying he looks like me, he could be my brother and stuff like that, just joking around. The spirit's very high, and I think more stories need to be told about it. Humanisation.
He's the big deal. He's the real deal. He's shot down a plane.
On what's going on, I think people appreciate that. To physically see them smiling, like yesterday I was in a military hospital, speaking to the soldiers who are just choked. They've got blast injuries. They're being attacked by drones and rockets, but they're happy. They all want to go back to the front line. Can you imagine being blown up and then wanting to go back to the front line? But that's a soldier's way of dealing with things. They're joking around, and I tried to add a bit of humour to my reporting.
A helicopter you shot down.
Helicopter.
Do you get free drinks when you go to pub now?
Because on my Instagram I'm very sarcastic and British. That's our humour. And obviously some people message me and go, oh, that's really disrespectful. But then in my own terms, like, yeah, whatever. Yeah. Because the majority of people appreciate to see a bit of humour in a dark place. Yeah. And especially me being an ex-Marine and these guys being soldiers, I relate to that. I understand their language, and I build rapport with soldiers very easily because I understand it. I understand the body language, what needs to be done, when to film, when not to film, what to do, sit, drink with them, just joke around and that.
You touched on something and which really connects to the spirit of the soldiers in the front line and the spirit of Armenians, not just in Armenia, but also in the diaspora, is this idea that the timing of this war is incredible by Azerbaijan and Turkey. It's the fact that they just hope that Karabakh and the people of Armenia in the region would just fold, right? In the middle of a pandemic. But that hasn't happened. In fact, it has united the community in Armenia, in Karabakh, and in the diaspora. And it has actually fueled the desire for us to fight more, for us to exist, for us to actually stand up for something. Talk to me a little bit about that correlation of the timing of this war, and it hasn't quite turned out the way that they had expected. And were you surprised to see the kind of spirit that you saw, not just in Karabakh, but I know you spent some time in Armenia as well?
The spirit of, like I was saying earlier, is that Armenians feel they're fighting for their homes, to protect them. If they believe, if they don't hold off the Turks, as every soldier just called everyone a Turk on the other side, all Turks, they'll just say. If they don't hold them off there, they're going to push into actual Armenia. So like they're keeping that buffer zone. So definitely there's that sense of morale amongst it, and the passion to stand and fight. And I think Azerbaijan with support of Turkey, which I don't think this was just a spontaneous. I think this was planned long in advance. Obviously, I don't have evidence to support that. But like I said, the world's attention is elsewhere with COVID. They probably thought it'd be a bit of a lightning war, a blitzkrieg, to get in there, clear it. COVID and everything else. Armenian forces pull out. They've won the war. They've taken over the land, the territory. Which doesn't seem to have worked that way. And I think that's why it's a bit of a well, it's not a stalemate, but that's why there's a lot of rocket launches. That's why civilian targets being launched, attacked. I think it's trying to break the will. But I think it's very much is that. Like yesterday in Yerevan, I was going around. I was going to the shelters where the locations where women are making camouflage nets for the vehicles, with a hand weaving them.
It says it takes them a day to make a camouflage net like this, and they send them to the front line.
There's definitely a community spirit, very much a war effort that across the whole of Armenia, everyone seems to be pulling together.
I have been watching the fundraising, the collecting of medical equipment and humanitarian aid, and it going to Armenia, but watching it on the ground over there too, is people just turning up. And this is not a country or a situation where you have, systems set up or an assembly line set up or this is just grassroots community coming together to do this. Talk to me a little bit about that. That was really impressive for me to see all of those camouflage nets happening and all of these, humanitarian stuff being collected for soldiers. Tell me your impressions from yesterday.
Could you show me how to actually do it? Because I think I've got fat fingers.
The biggest impression of the whole day is that I'm really rubbish at making camouflage nets, tying them up with my fat fingers. That was what I took away from yesterday. I'm going to leave it to the women who've got smaller fingers who seem to be doing it brilliantly. So the purpose of yesterday was I got back to the city and I thought I could sit in a hotel, I could go sit in bars and just chill out and just enjoy myself, or I can actually network and find out what's going on in the humanisation for the war effort from the people that have got loved ones on the front line. So I went around, people connecting through Instagram and Facebook, messaging me going, "Oh, we're doing this project, want to come down and film it?" I was like, "Yeah, cool, I'll meet you there."
And you can see here they're loading up the vans.
What the key issue for me in this war is every single person knows someone that's connected to the war, and that's what it is. It's not like me being in the military where we walked into the careers office, recruitment centre, we volunteered, and only a small selection of us went off. Martial law's been in place, men up to the age of 55. Obviously, there's certain stipulations if certain people don't have to go as such, but the majority of the adults, men, have been mobilised. So everyone's got a cousin. Even if people like yourself in Los Angeles, you probably know someone there who's been mobilised. If it's a cousin, an uncle, or friend. So it's not just for the select few who go, "Oh, I know someone who knows someone who's a soldier who's away fighting." Everyone goes, "I know someone," 100%. And I think that's what makes it very different. I think that's why there's so many civilians helping out and wanting to do their bit, because I think a lot of people, what I felt yesterday in the city is a lot of people feel impotent, that life's still going on, people are still going to restaurants and bars and stuff like that, but they feel like they're not doing enough.
This is Michael, who's going to the front line in 3 days, joining the military.
I think they feel like they're not doing enough because they're not seeing what's going on. And I think that's why, like I say, my Instagram story is quite important, because people seeing what's going on, they feel less anxious.
Right.
So many people listen to me saying that their mother, their father, their grandparents have been so anxious, and this is giving them a little bit of a calming, relax. They're seeing soldiers smile. They're seeing civilians in bunkers, but yeah, there are some sad people, but overall people are being resilient and getting on with it.
Yeah, the unknown is the worst, right? No matter how bad the circumstances are, when you see it, then your mind doesn't run off into this unknown space of making it worse than it is. You're able to actually process what you're watching and what you're seeing.
But this is a place that's quite sacred for a lot of Armenians, and you can hear the music playing.
I know that you visited the memorial the other day. I saw you post on social media. Tell me if it felt like anything. What did it feel like being there?
It's quite an emotional place in the sense that, especially when you go inside. I don't know. Apologies for those who know, but when you go inside where the fire is, the eternal flame, and the echo in there, and the sense that you feel the sorrow of it, and when you see things like that, and you get a feeling. I then speak to Armenians, and when they're talking about potential second genocide, I get why they feel that they need to win, they need to fight, because they don't want that to be repeated in history. So I totally get that. But yeah, it's really eye-opening. It's something that personally, my ignorance, I didn't know enough about, and I'm trying to learn more about actually there, so I get better education on it, so I can then pass that knowledge on to other people.
Yeah. Okay, so a couple of things are happening. So because you're independent, you also need funding in not only covering this, but also developing this feature documentary. And I understand that you've set up a GoFundMe page to sort of get that moving. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so making documentaries, there's two ways of actually getting something commissioned, in the sense that you fund it yourself and then you try to sell it as such at the end. Or you go around TV companies to get commission, and then they fund it, and then you go. And that's a longer way around. That takes a long time, because people are a bit slow with the paperwork and stuff. So the way I do my documentaries, I self-fund them, and then go out and produce them to get them done. It gets the ball rolling a lot quicker. So with this project, when I said I was leaving Armenia, the amount of people that were messaging me going, "Please don't go. You're our eyes and our ears. You're the only one that we trust in what's going on, reporting it." And I'm not an Instagram journalist. I'm a filmmaker. I make documentaries, or I do short clips. I do filming, news clips and stuff like that. And I thought I didn't have long enough on the ground. I've got a GoFundMe account at the moment to get funding to go back and make a full feature documentary on what I've seen so far, and focus on the humanisation of the conflict and stories of the civilians and the military and the community spirit across the whole country. However, for that to be possible, it's not just the funding, is that I need access. I need Ministry of Defence approval to allow me to film a little bit longer, to go, okay, we know what this man's up to, we see the plan, and then working in conjunction with them to actually get the true story, rather than, I was very limited on this trip, just gone on how long I could spend in places. It's like, you know yourself, being a journalist, you turn up somewhere, you pull your camera out, you get people very rigid, they're like, they're worried about what they're going to say. You sit around for an hour or two, you build a rapport with them, then you get the camera out, you get the true story.
Right.
You don't get the party line, the narrative, you get the truth of what's going on, you get the humour of it, you get the darkness of the story. So and definitely to make a feature documentary, I need to spend more time on the ground.
Yeah, and the reality is that's what Armenians have been asking for, right? Just tell the truth. And this is, I think, why you have been so popular and successful, is that it's not one of them or one of us. It's an independent voice. This is not propaganda. It is just tell the human side of the story, tell the truth, tell what you experience and see in an honest way. And that's all we collectively and diaspora has been calling for. And, I personally put something together myself, but it was, based on my own experience of watching the images come out of the region. So,
if you were to talk about this conflict and show things, people go, well, you've got affiliation here. You're biased. You're subjective. But if I think what's the unique thing about me is, it's not, don't take this in the wrong way, but it's not I don't care, because it's not my war. I don't have to particularly take a side. I don't have an agenda. I don't have a political allegiance or anything else. And knowing that, I'm still actually learning about your history and traditions. So for me, I'm just reporting on what I'm seeing. And that's what makes it very different, because the sense is, if I see Armenia doing something that I don't agree with, I will speak out about it. I'm like saying earlier, I'm not a propaganda machine. I'm not a mouthpiece for you. But definitely, from what I've seen, I've been very impressed, especially from the fact is that it's like a David and Goliath battle, in my opinion. And even speaking to the soldiers, they're like, we'll win it. They're so confident that they're going to win the war. And even walking around the cities, you see the posters like victory, we're going to win, we're winning the war and everything. It's that, of course, it's propaganda, to get people psyched up as such. Every conflict's on that. But definitely there's a feeling that people feel that losing isn't an option.
Thank you so much for spending almost an hour with us. We appreciate you not only sharing your experience, but also appreciate you putting yourself on the line to do this type of work. It is incredibly important and significant, and we owe a debt of gratitude to you for all of us who have been nail biting and waiting and patiently trying to figure out what's going on and why the world is silent. So thank you for being our eyes and ears on the ground. If you want to get in touch with him, you can find him on Instagram. I'll make sure that the handle is on this interview. I'll make sure his information is available. If you want to get a hold of him directly, you can. If you want to get a hold of me to get a hold of him, we can do that too. I am hopeful that this helped with the process of the story being told. Thank you so much for your time, and be safe.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
I'm Silva Harapetian. Welcome to my show. We talk ordinary people, extraordinary stories, living life on their own terms.